Welcome back to another episode of the Honey and Coffee podcast. I'm Gio Kuranai, and once again, I'm joined by my friend and fellow light novelist, Atish. Before we get started on today's topic, I just want to point out that our pilot episode got over 3,000 views as of this time of recording, and for a new podcast, this is a pretty good number. And we even got some fairly good number of responses and comments. And because of the good reception we received, the higher ups at Honeyfeed have decided to greenlight this series as an official series on Honey's Anime on their YouTube channel. Thank you guys for the responses, and we'll be looking forward to more because we always look at every single one of them. And speaking of comments, one of them came in the form of a question on a writing tip from SKMV Master. It goes, I would like to know about how to stop procrastinating on writing. Any writer goes through this at least one time in his or her career, and some of us can't fight back with it and end up with a hard decision of leaving writing. What are your opinions on it? How to overcome that fear? I wrote an answer to that, but let me reiterate it right here. First off, I don't force myself to write when I'm procrastinating. I just simply let the feeling pass on, and when it does, I usually feel like I can write beyond my usual limits because, well, there's that quote, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And when I'm not writing, I do other activities, anything that isn't writing, whether it be driving, cooking something, anything. And if I feel like I want to write but also feel too lazy to physically do it, then I do other things like imagine potential new characters, plot points, or certain aspects that need polishing, and my mind works best when it's relaxed. Even if I'm not writing, it doesn't mean that I'm not writing. It's still progress, even if I don't put down these words on a page. That's my answer to his question. And Atish, I'm curious to know if you have one as well for it.
No, before I begin, dude, you're basically procrastinating to kill procrastinating. You think about potential new characters and ideas. Isn't that trying to procrastinate to stop procrastinating?
I'm slowly getting myself excited to get back to writing.
Yeah, I understand. As for me, I just don't write if I'm procrastinating, or whenever that invisible wall or whatever we call procrastinating comes in. I'll just stop writing. I won't write. I'll do anything that's not writing. The one thing that I love to do when it comes to procrastinating is just go to sleep, reset your mind, reset yourself, wake up, and start working on whatever you want to do, whatever you wanted to write before you start procrastinating. And it works out for me. But it's different for everyone. But for me, the best step to avoid, to overcome procrastinating is just go to sleep. That's enough.
In other words, we basically think alike when it comes to procrastination.
Yep, just sleep. Just kill procrastinating. Just don't think about it.
If more questions come along, we will definitely answer them. And shout out once again to SKMB Master. Thank you for your question, and we'll be looking forward to more from whether it be from you or anyone else who has something they'd like to ask us. So moving on. Like in our previous episode, what we talked about was the web novel website Honeyfeed.
The roots, the origin of both of us, the place where we started our journey as light novelists. Yep.
Yeah, and Honeyfeed is obviously full of light novels, and as light novels are stories, you got to know how to tell a story. So what we're going to be talking about in this episode are the storytelling styles of light novels that are found in Honeyfeed. The name says it all. It's a style of how you tell your story. And there are different ways to tell it, and each way has their own strengths and weaknesses, but it's also because of these constraints that they could give off a unique kind of experience for the reader. And we all have our favorites, and we have those that we're used to, and those that we want to try. When a storytelling style is divided into three different styles that you can use. There's first person, second person, and third person. Is there anything you want to say about these styles?
First person is I love to read, but I try to avoid writing. I don't, I can't write first person. I've tried a lot of times, and I've ended up being like, this is the worst thing I've ever written. Second person, it's better I don't talk about it. I avoid it as much as I can. I've read a few things in second person, not my cup of tea. And then it comes to third person. Then third person is that comfortable area where all my stories reside in. Just writing it in third person, being the narrator for your world and explaining the stories of all the characters around you. I feel like third person, I mean, at least for me, is the best way of writing.
Let's go over them. These styles or perspectives, as an alternate way to call them. So in a first-person perspective, what you're trying to do as the writer is to build intimacy between the reader and the narrator is played by the main character of the story. So since this is a story being told from their perspective, you have to let the reader inside that character's head. The story has to be told with the character's voice, if you know what I mean. Like, how would they tell the story when you take their personality into account? One nice thing about it is that since he doesn't necessarily know everything, there's a chance that his personality can actually get in the way. What if your narrator was delusional or dishonest? You know, they may see things that one way, but later on you may find out that they were wrong. Generally, you're telling a story through one character, what they see. You don't get into the head of secondary or side characters unless they're showing hard evidence that they may be thinking or feeling something. You get what I'm saying, Atish?
Yep. The readers would be looking at the world from the eyes of the narrator, while the narrator would be, basically telling a story maybe from their past, maybe trying to give an opinion on whatever they think about the world. And just go on, it can be anything, just imagine this, maybe a story of a caveman starting like, I was born in this era and I've been doing this. It's not a good example, but Geo has a better example than me.
Basically, imagine yourself telling a personal story to someone else. Now put that down as words for a book. That is a first person. So generally, you would often see the pronoun I, like I was going through this and I was going through that. Something else to keep in mind is like when you're doing a first person story, since there can be multiple characters, you can make anybody the main character in a sense. Say the story of that fairy tale of Rapunzel, that girl who was trapped in a tower, has long hair, about 25 feet long, and she has this romance with a prince who was able to meet her by climbing her hair up to the tower she's locked in. If you were to write Rapunzel in a first-person perspective, you can either make Rapunzel or the prince the main character, and depending on who's the main character, the story will be told from their point of view. Let's say if the scenario was about Rapunzel letting the prince meet her by unbraiding her hair and dropping it down to him, like from Rapunzel's point of view, like a sample passage could be her saying, "I hope he appreciates how long it takes to unbraid 25 feet of hair, I thought. I'll be honest, I thought my scalp would stretch off my skull as the prince climbed me. I even asked him if he can climb faster." Now, in the same scenario, what if the prince was the main character? So a first-person story is meant to be very personal and very close, between, like I said, it's between the reader and the narrator. So it's a very focused perspective.
For me, there's this one opening of a first-person book that I still believe to be one of the best opening I've ever read. Just let me read this paragraph. Whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own life or whether that station will be held by anybody else, these pages must show. To begin my life with the beginning of my life, I record that I was born, as I have been informed and believe, on a Friday at 12 o'clock at night. It was remarked that the clock began to strike and I began to cry simultaneously. So this is basically the opening of the book called a novel called David Copperfield, written by Charles Dickens. It's a first-person perspective, and one of my favorite openings. By listening to this paragraph, you can understand how the writer tried use the first person to make us invested on the narrator, on basically the main character, on how he looks at the world, or how he's basically what's going through his mind.
To quote what a Romanian author once said about first person, "I shall only list what my eyes see, what my ears hear, what my senses register. For myself, I can't step out." That's a short and sweet way to describe a first person story, and something to keep in mind if you're writing a first person story. Narrating a passage is okay and all, but it's a lot better if a person could read it. So I'd say we should just post a link down below in the description of a sample first person story that we recommend.
Just go and check out these stories that we have. Understand for yourself what first person, second person, or third person, whatever style we're going to talk about.
So moving on, there's first person, and now we're moving on to second person. Actually, a very uncommon storytelling perspective. In a second person, the narrator talks to the reader, who is placed as the main character. Imagine if the person telling the story was talking to you. That's second person in a nutshell. To be honest, I don't have much experience with writing a second person. I've read a few, but when it comes to writing them, that's something I'd still have to try out in the future.
For me, the only second person experience I have for the fan fiction I've read, that is basically the character from a particular fandom, X the reader. The only thing I know from second person, if that is even a second person.
The second person can kind of feel hit or miss when the narrator is treating you as this kind of character, because what if you're not? What if you're like the main character of the story is supposed to be a girl with this kind of personality, but well, maybe you're not a girl, or maybe you don't have that kind of personality, so you feel a little hit or miss.
If you make any decision that that you wouldn't make in IRL, that your personality does not allow you, it's going to be a bit annoying to follow that character. So what we can say is, second person, not everyone's going to like it. Some people are going to hate it, some people are going to love it.
I'd say I'm just not used to it because I don't see it very often compared to first or third person. Like a sample passage for a second person story would be like, as you step into the old Craven Woods, you'll never escape the crows. From what I just dictated, the narrator is talking to you. Hence the pronoun you is being used in this case. You should not use the pronoun you in a first person or a third person story, or it would be a point of view slip, which is something that we often want to avoid if we don't intend to use multiple perspectives in the same story. There's no rule against it, but it's just not recommended if you're just starting out. I think you should really master the strengths and weaknesses of all perspectives before you try doing something like that. So that's all I gotta say about a second person story. The narrator talks to you, and you are put into the main character's shoes. We also have a second person story from Honeyfeed. A link to that is going to be posted in the description below.
Now we finally get to the good part. It's finally time.
So third person this time. Generally, this is the perspective that gives the most freedom because the narrator, they have a general viewpoint of the world that's taking place in the story. In fact, a third person is actually divided into two categories. You have limited and omniscient. When you talk about limited third person, the narrator sticks close to the thoughts and feelings of a character that they're currently focused on. It's very similar to first person in essence. The only difference is like you won't be using the pronoun I because the narrator is not the main character. Instead, the narrator would use pronouns like he, she, they because they're talking about someone else. And when you're doing a limited third person perspective, the narrator is going to focus on that character depending on what's being told in the story. The narrator focuses on a specific character and will eventually switch later on. Now, the other subcategory of third person, omniscient, this is one where the narrator quickly switches focus between multiple characters, as well as give the reader more information about the story that the characters might not know. So, like the name implies, omniscient, the narrator basically knows everything about the story. It's just basically telling the reader in sequence, like what does the narrator want to give out. Since the narrator has access to knowledge that characters in the story may not know of, this is where things like background stories or lore regarding the world that the story takes place in, that's an example of an omniscient storyteller. When we're talking third person omniscient, the narrator is like generally above the characters. Like the narrator is watching everything, watching the events playing out and describing it to the reader.
Basically looking at a chessboard with all the characters being the chess pieces.
Imagine watching a parade. If a third person narrator would be like watching the parade from the side, watching things go by in sequence, while an omniscient narrator would be watching the parade from above, where they see everything, even the details that other characters may have not noticed, and they may point them out to the readers. Execution of a third person omniscient can be a little difficult since the narrator generally knows everything. But like any storytelling style, it can be done right. Those are the three storytelling styles or perspectives that you may find when you look at any novel in Honeyfeed. My main story, Parable of the Renegades, is written in a third-person perspective. It's actually a mixture of both limited and omniscient because there are moments when the narrator talks to a specific character, and there are times that the narrator actually explains lore regarding a certain element of the story when it's introduced. And I try my best not to go omniscient as much as possible. I only do it when I feel like it's really necessary. I'm already doing a mixture of third person. At the very least, I stick solely to that style. I've also written in first person, but those are only for my one-shot stories because I usually have little time to write them, and I've only written one-shots for contests that Honeyfeed or maybe Orion Studios have given out. The reason why I often write first person for a one shot is because it's like recounting a story to someone. I pretend I'm my main character of the story. How would I tell my story to someone when I take my main character's voice into account? First person is like, for me, feels like the easiest to write. You're imagining yourself as this character you created, and you're also, how would you make that character tell a story to someone? Third person requires a little more careful planning. But I do enjoy switching the focus to multiple characters. And by the way, Parable of the Renegades is available for purchase on Amazon as either a paperback or an ebook on Kindle. But if you don't want to spend money on it, you can always read the beta version on Honeyfeed, which is the unedited version. The official release has a revised manuscript and extra stuff that make it way better than the beta web novel version. But if you want to get a taste of how I write, the links of both the store page of the official release and the beta version of Parable of the Renegades will be in the description below. So far, only Volume 1 has been released. I am currently working on Volume 2. I hope to get it released as soon as I do what I must with it. So with that, we've given the basic information regarding the common storytelling styles or perspectives that you may find in Honeyfeed. Despite what we said, the way you must tell these stories are not golden rules that must be followed as is. Every author has their own style, and it's up to you to discover which style fits you the most. It's up to you to hone it to its best potential.
You have to follow what we said. Yeah, your choice.
Try everything and find which one do you feel is most suited to your way of writing. When you do find what you feel is best, you hone it. Keep practicing, and nothing wrong with shifting to another perspective if you feel like what you thought was your best turned out to not be. And you don't have to be limited to just one style. You can write one story in first person, one in second, one in third, and you could even do a mixture of these two, but I wouldn't really recommend it. But if you can execute it well, then why not?
Despite me saying that I don't like to write in first person, there's one thing I wanted to add before we end this podcast. When we first time write a story, it's always in first person. You don't write in third person when you write a story for the first time ever. I don't know how it happens, but for me and for a lot of my friends that I have been with, in the school days, all of us, when we started writing for the first time, it was first person. It happened instinctively. Back then, it felt to be the most easiest way to write. But as you start, get deeper into the writing sphere, first person becomes harder to write for some reason, at least for me. But yeah, first person is the starting point for everyone.
In real life, if you're going to tell a story, you're most likely going to tell it from how you remember it, and that's the closest to a first person story. So with that being said, that ends today's podcast episode. Thank you guys for listening to us.
I hope it helped you out some way. Just tell us if it was helpful or not. And if you have any questions, just put it in the comment section, because I do believe you're going to have a lot of questions after this.
We will be sure to address them as soon as possible. Probably even mention it in the next episode as well. So like, share, subscribe, click the bell icon, and we'll see you guys again.
Just smash the like button and do subscribe. Guys, we want more subscribers, and the more you subscribe, the more episodes gonna come in. It all depends on you, and we're gonna just come over and over again for you guys as long as you want to listen to us. So yeah, that's about it. Do look forward to the next episode, and we'll be looking forward to your comments down below. And we're gonna have any kind of question if you have, we're just gonna reply to you and help you out. So yeah, thank you guys for listening to us. Have a good day. Take care.
Until next time.